Welcome back, welcome back. 1 year on from last year's war and Gaza is still blockaded. Israeli settlements continue to be built on a restricted basis, but they're continuing to be built, and the negotiations between the Israeli and Palestinian leaders are at a current standstill, for which each side blames the other. Last night, Israeli jets were back over Gaza, launching a new airstrike. Reportedly, 3 civilians were killed. Will things get any better in 2010? Can President Obama live up to his Nobel Prize by breaking the deadlock? To find out more, I'm joined now from Jerusalem by the Israeli government's official spokesman, Mark Regev. Mark, thank you very much for joining us. As you know, before Christmas we did a longish interview with Saeb Erekat, in which he was very passionate about the situation between Israel and the Palestinians, and I wondered what your specific reaction to what he was saying, where you thought he was right or wrong.
Well, Saeb's a friend, and I'd say the tragedy that we as Israelis and Palestinians both face today is the fact that we're not talking. And this is almost unprecedented because despite all the problems and all the differences of position between what Palestinians think and what Israelis think, I think it's generally understood that the only way to solve issues is by negotiating. And unfortunately, over the last, 9-10 months, we haven't been negotiating, and it's a historic mistake. We've been wasting time.
Well, they refused to talk until the settlement process is halted, and it's been partially halted for 10 months, but not totally, as we know, and we had news in the last few days of more buildings in East Jerusalem and so on. It's the settlement issue that really stands there, and that goes to the heart of what he said when he was talking about Palestinians have accepted Israel to live in peace and security within secure and recognized boundaries on 78% of the historic British Mandate of Palestine, and accepted to for the Palestinian state to remain at 22%. But the 22% of the land is being eaten up by the settlements, and this should stop. That was what he was saying, the 78-22.
I understand the Palestinian position on settlements. But let's be clear here, the current Israeli government, a government that's perceived as being hawkish, as perceived as being right-wing, has actually gone further than any previous Israeli government, more than the Sharon government, more than the Olmert government, in showing restraint and flexibility on this very sensitive issue for the Palestinians. We're not building any new settlements, full stop. We're not outwardly expanding existing communities. And for the first time ever, the Israeli government, this current Israeli government, as I said, it's unprecedented, has gone for a 10-month settlement moratorium on all new authorizations for growth, for building inside the settlements.
Of course, the Gazan situation is still horrible, and there are blockades still up there that nobody understands why they're there and so on. I mean, when will their lot improve?
Well, first of all, let's be clear. Every day, over 100 trucks enter the Gaza Strip with foodstuffs and medicines and so forth. We are ensuring that there are no shortages in Gaza of vital humanitarian supplies that the people there need. Are there sanctions on Gaza? There are. And those sanctions will remain as long as the regime in Gaza is, first of all, holding one of our young servicemen hostage, and he has been held now for more than 3.5 years. And also, as long as the regime there is committed to destroying Israel and killing Israelis. I mean, ultimately, the people of Gaza are under the thumb of a very brutal authoritarian regime that puts its own extremist political agenda ahead of the well-being of the people of Gaza. If the regime there stopped being so hostile, we wouldn't have to respond.
There's news, Mark, today of 3 Palestinians being killed in Gaza strikes. Do you agree with the figure of 3, and why did it happen?
What we've seen, unfortunately, over the last few days is that people are firing rockets again from Gaza into southern Israel. And my Prime Minister has been very clear on this. We will not accept these sort of attacks on our civilians. We won't accept these sort of attacks. If there are rockets fired from Gaza into Israel, we will respond.
And in terms of the period, the end of the Gaza war, the Gaza attacks approximately a year ago, how long were there no rockets fired from Gaza? How long did that prevail?
Well, the truth is that is the good news, that we've had a period up until now of almost unprecedented quiet in the south, where the people of southern Israel, as you know, who were living for years under these bombardments from Gaza. You had children who grew up and their whole lives only knew what it was like to run to a bomb shelter, who never managed to sleep through a night without having to hear a siren go off and run to a secure room or something, to a fortified shelter. Those people in Gaza, those Israeli civilians, and we're talking about tens of thousands of people, have had a period of unprecedented quiet. Now, we want that to continue. And our message to the people of Gaza is, don't let Hamas once again lead to an escalation of the situation. Don't let Hamas cause a spiral of violence. If it's quiet from Gaza, they'll be quiet from Israel. It's as simple as that.
And one other issue, which is a quiet issue at the moment, but could become a deafening issue, Mark, is what is the plan, what is the situation, what is the fear about Iran and Iran's nuclear capacity?
I don't think many international leaders would use the word alleged. I think there's a consensus today, a consensus from Moscow to Berlin, to Washington, to Ottawa, to Tokyo, to Canberra, a consensus internationally, I would also say, amongst the Arab world, that sees the Iranian nuclear program as not being benign at all. I think there's an acceptance, a consensus in the international community that the Iranians are after a bomb. And we say now is the time for international pressure on that regime. It's time to upgrade.
Well, in fact, in today's Economist, there's a long piece called The Gathering Storm about this particular issue. And here is one quote. "If Iran gets nuclear weapons, the Middle East will look like hell," says one senior Israeli official. "I cannot imagine that we can live with a nuclear Iran. For Israel, 2010 is the year of decision, yet its ability to destroy the nuclear sites is questionable, and such a strike may precipitate a regional war or worse." A bleak prospect.
I think it is a bleak prospect. And without dotting on the line on everything The Economist has reported, I'd say very strongly, Iran today, without nuclear weapons, is a force for instability and violence in the region. Now imagine that Iran armed with nuclear weapons, with Iranian proxies armed with a nuclear umbrella behind them. I mean, this would be the end of the Middle East situation as we know it. This would be a threat to our Arab neighbors. It would be a threat to the West. It would be a threat, of course, to my country, Israel. And that's why I think you've seen a whole series of UN Security Council resolutions. All members of the United Nations Security Council have passed a whole series of resolutions, many of them unanimously, calling on the Iranians to cease nuclear enrichment, to stop trying to build bombs. It's not an Israeli position. This is an international consensus. They must stop. And we've got to now turn words into actions. The Iranian leadership must understand that its nuclear program must stop.
Well, thank you very much for joining us as ever, Mark, and I suppose those words we'll be discussing again in the course of this year, that 2010 is the year of decision for Israel. We'll be talking a lot in 2010. Thank you for being with us.
My pleasure.
Singer and actress Camille O'Sullivan joins me in just a moment after this incredibly short break.